Welcome to this Mastery Empowerment course from New Earth One Network. This is designed exclusively for your higher self connection and embodiment. Welcome, everyone. We are here with Peter Panagore, whose two near-death experiences are lessons for humanity. Truly, a lesson in love. As we're going to hear from Peter, he returned from the most beautiful place for love. He did it for love. And I would say it's safe to say that we're all doing this for love. Hi, Peter. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Hi, Lauren. Thank you very much for inviting me here, and good to see you again.
Wonderful to see you. Your near-death experiences, you've had two, and they were at different timelines, different times in your timeline. The first was in your 20s, and it took you a while to reconcile that and own it. Let's start there, because this is really wisdom you learned in heaven, and now you're ready to share it.
Yes, I kept my mouth shut for close to 20 years afterwards because it takes, studies show, it takes about 10 years to integrate a near-death experience back into your life. It took me 20 years because I did it by myself. I had no help. I was on my own because it happened in 1980, and I was a college student, 21 years old. I had been on national student exchange in Montana State to Montana State University in Bozeman, Montana. And in the springtime, I didn't want to go back to Boston. I wanted to go have an adventure. And so I won't tell the whole adventure because we don't have a lot of time for it, but I suffice it to say that it was a very high adventure, ice climbing and snow caving in Alberta and British Columbia, Canada in the wintertime. So it was a very expedition sort of event. It wasn't my first time doing such a thing, but it was my first time ice climbing. But the winter camping thing, the backcountry skiing thing, snow caving, that was up my alley. Mountain climbing, right down things that I had done most of my life. To make a long story short, I froze to death. I made a mistake in my gear. I made an error in my choices, and my error cascaded into a disaster for my partner, Tim, and for me, my climbing partner, who was a certified lead climber. And we were on a world-class climb, a world-famous climb called Lower Weeping Wall, north of Banff for my Canadian friends. You know where that is, on the Icefields Parkway. We were one of many teams climbing that day. But because of my equipment choice, I had a hammer in one hand, which is about 6 inches long, and an axe, which is about 18 inches long or so, 24 inches long. And I couldn't come up with another axe. So I climbed with a hammer. And what that meant is that every time I planted my axe, I had to plant it much shorter a distance. I couldn't get a full swing, and because the hammer could only kind of put me up 2 inches above my hand, where the axe would put me about 1.5 feet above my hand. So my climb, foot by foot, was smaller than every other climber. So every time I swung my axe, instead of moving up 2 feet, I moved up about 6 inches or maybe 10 inches. So what that meant was my climb was slower, and I had to grip the axe the whole time, the hammer the whole time with strength, But on an axe, you can relax. You can let go of the handle and just dangle on this thing, set it in the ice and dangle on this thing. But the hammer, you got to grip this thing the whole time. So by the time we were nearing the top of the climb, 500 or 600 foot climb, we were way late. And the sun was coming to set. It was March, and we knew that we were in serious, desperate trouble before we even got to the top of the climb. When we got to the top of the climb, the sun set, temperature dropped about 30 degrees. All the other teams were down at the bottom. I could see them way down there leaving, and I could see them looking up at us like, what are those crazy guys doing up there? We're trying to get off. We knew how serious the situation was. And immediately hypothermia began to set in and violent shivers. That was just the start of it. So I'll run through. I won't tell you the whole story through the night. It was terrifying. I'll suffice it to say, it was absolutely terrifying. Trauma that I took me until, well, maybe 8 or 9 years ago to finally heal from. But we knew that we were going to die. As soon as we got to the top, we knew that our situation was desperate, and that if we stayed where we were going to die, and we were probably going to die even if we tried to get off. But we decided to get off. So in the dark, we traversed and repelled and traversed and repelled. And I shorten this story down. There's a lot of tragedy that happens in the middle of this trauma, but hypothermia continued to advance through the night. By the time we reached our last rappel, we were about 100, 150 feet up. We were pinned. There were iron pins in the rock with rings on them, with carabiners and straps and other carabiners. First time in the night that we were safe, like safe from falling. Tim was hooked into my left, and I was hooked into the right of his. And we're standing on a ledge, maybe the size of the desk you're sitting at, twice the size of the desk you're sitting at. And off to the right-hand side, and it was probably 2 or 3 hours before dawn. I don't really know what time it was because I didn't have a watch on. I had taken well, I should say that my hands were frozen. My feet were blocks of ice. Our hypothermia had advanced to the place of it was difficult to speak. Our jaws were frozen. Our lips were frozen. Our brains were freezing. So we were making poor decisions. Our coordination was off, lost mostly. And when I tied off the line to my harness and took the other end and tossed it off to the side to pull the rope down from the iron ring at the top of the rappel, it jammed on the first pull. I pulled this thing, and we thought we were just going to pull this rope down and be safe and get down to our tent and treat ourselves for hypothermia, but that's not what happened. The rope jammed on the first pull, and we were in really a desperate situation now. We had been fighting. I had been fighting all night long, using my willpower to drive myself forward, using this deep part of myself that I didn't know that I had, which was survival. But this part of me that was all about survival came to the forefront and was driving me forward. And Tim was in the same situation. Neither of us panicked. I want to say that too. We kept our heads through the entire thing. And we learned about each other. We had spent the week before snow caving in the back country in British Columbia, and which is just across the border. It's quite close to Alberta where we were. And so we learned to trust each other in difficult situations, and we understood the skill sets each other had, and we trusted. So we were level-headed through the whole thing, but we were petrified. So the rope was stuck, and I couldn't get it free. And Tim, given the circumstances, couldn't help me get it free. And every pull I pulled on the rope, it got tighter and tighter. The jam got worse. And some hours passed as I tried to pull the rope, and my hypothermia continued to advance. And I should say that I was in a most beautiful place. There was 60 bazillion stars in the sky of every color you can imagine. The whole sky was filled with stars. And the moon was maybe a 3/4 moon, and we could see off into the mountains that were near us. It was stunningly beautiful. But there came this point where I realized I was going to die here. And I've been driving myself forward with all this willpower, but suddenly I realized and I'll tell you what happened is that I got warm. And that's crazy, because I knew I was on the National Ski Patrol. I've been since I was in high school. So that was a junior in college. I'd been on the ski patrol since a freshman in high school. And so I've been working in a mountain. I've been trained in first responder, particularly around frostbite and hypothermia, because this winter was very cold. There's a couple of 50 below days on the mountain when I was skiing, when I was working as a student. And I got hot and I unzipped my coat and Tim yelled at me, "Don't unzip your coat. You know that's wrong." I'm like, "Yeah, I know it's wrong, but I'm hot. I'm sweating." And I remember thinking to myself, I can lose a hand. I can lose a foot. I felt like all the blood had rushed to my core, into my brain, and into my vitals, my heart, and my lungs. And I remember thinking, well, it's all right. If I lose a hand, my body will survive. At least I'll survive. And that's just completely irrational. And it was at that point that I realized I was not going to get out of this. And so suddenly, instead of driving myself forward, I had this wave of peace roll through me. I sort of relaxed and I started thinking about my family and my parents in particular. And my sister had vanished when I was 14. She had run away, but had broken my family. It's like having a death in the family, but there's no resolution. We didn't know where she was. There was always this open wound, and it caused a lot of family trauma. And so I was thinking to myself, what do I do? What are my parents going to do when I die? They're going to lose another kid. It's going to, destroy my mother and my father. But I was at peace with my situation. There's nothing I could do about it. So then I began to fall asleep. And I would fall asleep. And when I fell asleep, I would black out. I'd be struggling with the rope, and then I could feel sleep fly up onto me, like, and I would just go into darkness and I'd collapse and I'd fall down and I'd hit the rock because we were off the ice at this point. I had a helmet on. And so I smacked the rock with my helmet, and that would wake me up, and I'd pull myself back up and I'd yank on the rope, and I'd repeat this process. I don't know how many times. And then I stood up this one time, and I stood up, and as I stood up, I had I've come to discover the last symptom of hypothermia is tunnel vision, which is like I describe it as a spotlight on a stage. If you're on a stage and the spotlight fills the stage, outside the edge of the spotlight is blackness, and then the spot comes down very close to you, and so all around me, all around my vision, it was black, and it just closed down on me like a spotlight. And I watched this, and it would move with me. I moved my head, and it moved with me. And I wondered, I'd never seen such a thing in my life. And it went whoosh, and went to blackness, and I went pop, blackness, and I remember thinking, what's this? Boom. And then I thought, I'm awake. Why am I conscious? Why am I not asleep? Why am I not unconscious? Why don't I feel any pain? Why do I feel like I'm not where I was before? And then in front of me, the whole, where the mountain had been, and I'm in darkness, but where the mountain had been, this darkness became expansive. It became infinite in width and breadth and depth. And it was, I can't describe to you how big it was, but it was also this crazy darkness that I could see in. And in the far, far distance, as far as I could see, and I was like, what is this? What is this? There's like a pinprick of light, like somebody took a pin and poked a hole in a black screen, and one bit of light poured through, and it was brilliant light. And this light rushed toward me across this incredible distance. It rushed toward me faster than the speed of light. And as it came at me, it got bigger, and it sort of filled my vision, and it communicated to me. It communicated to me telepathically, without language, non-linguistically, no words. It spoke to me inside myself and said, I'm taking you. And I said to it, no, you're not. I don't know what's going on, but I'm not going anywhere. And so I took all of this strength, this willpower that I had built all this night, driving myself for survival, and I put it up as a barrier, like a willful barrier. And it just reached through it and pulled me right out of myself, as if my strength was nothing. And as soon as it touched me, I understood that it was intelligence and all powerful. And it reached inside and pulled me right out. And I had all this resistance, but as soon as it touched me and pulled me right out, I realized that I understood that I had no more agency. I could make no more choices. And I was then enveloped, sort of, I guess, like resting on a feather bed inside of this orb of intelligence, which was speaking to me this whole time. It was speaking to me comfort and love and welcome and power and power, all this power. There was so much power that I knew that there was nothing I could do to resist. And it carried me. I was carried, I was carried sort of in this, I don't know, like an elevator shaft or a pipe, or it had this directionality to it. And I could still see out through it into this dark void, but I was also in a directed channel, a tunnel, but not like a walled tunnel, more like I don't know, an elevator shaft or an escalator or a highway, something that was open, or like a glass elevator I could see out of,
Maybe
and
Charlie Chocolate Factory's glass elevator.
something like that,
Wow.
something like that. And so it carried me this back to where it came from, in this vast this vast distance it carried me. And then, and I don't know how to describe this. Everything I say is metaphorical. I use all this language to try to talk about this thing that's ineffable. So I'm not sure whether it expanded into this infinite illuminated darkness, this um, heaven, or whether I popped out of this angelic form into this larger heaven, or whether they were the same thing. They seem to be the same, of the same substance to me. And I popped out of and into this illuminated darkness, and I became. I should also say that when I was being carried by this entity, this angel, I had some. It was like I had an astral body. I could see myself inside this entity, and I could see out of my eyes. But as soon as I was inside of heaven, I was no longer an astral form. I was an orb of consciousness. There were no things where I was, and I was no thing. There were no molecules, no quarks, no atoms. There was nothing like that. I was an energetic orb of consciousness, and my consciousness was myself, was my thinking, was my seeing, was my hearing, was all of myself. I've got 10 fingers and I can feel things. All of that was one thing. I was an energetic orb of consciousness, and I could see in every direction at once, like I had 10,000 eyes, and I was in an infinity, and I could see deep into the infinity, and I knew that I couldn't see the end of it. I knew it was humongous. It was this huge ocean in every direction, but as far as I could see, and I could see very far, but I couldn't see the beginning or the end of it. And the first sensation I had was of comfort, comfort and remembrance. This is who I am, I thought. I've always been this. This is the true me. This is the real me. This is myself, not what I had been before. How did I think that that was me before? Why was I blind? I didn't understand. But my thinking was rapid. I wasn't thinking in language because there were no words. I had no brain. There was just pure thought and understanding. And as I was in this infinite void, this infinite illuminated darkness, a portal opened in front of me, like a doorway or a waterfall. I see it as a waterfall in my memory, and it was right next to me, and it was flowing, luminescent, pearlescent light, just pouring out. It was like somebody had ripped open the darkness, and this living light flowed in a contained area, but it was huge. It was huge, and it was transparent and translucent and solid at the same time. I could see the surface of the pearlescent cover. I could see the depth of the light inside of it translucently, and I could see through it to the far side of it, transparently, where there was another tunnel. And this other tunnel led way far deep into the infinity. And I had this compulsion of attraction. I wanted, I was like, wow, what's this thing? And I reached toward it with my orb self, with my sensory self, and I touched it. And it was flowing. And as soon as I touched it, it flowed into me. And it was the first sensation I had was all livingness, all power, all creation, all life, all knowledge, all beauty, all love, all of everything there ever was. And then all these things happened simultaneously. And I should say that I was in timelessness. I was in the eternal now. And it wasn't just the now of now, it was all time that's ever existed in every dimension, all in this one place of beingness. And it flowed into me. And then all these things happened. I heard my name called. I heard myself being called, but it wasn't Peter, because Peter has never been me. My soul is has a name, and it was called into being, but not a pronounceable name, because no lips have ever spoken it. No lips can speak it. And it called me into be this, and I was in the presence of Creator. And Creator was saying to me, I create you, and I created you, and I will create you. And there was a timelessness to my birth. And my name was my very self. My name, my parents could have called me Charlie or Arthur or something, and I still would have been the same person. But that is not the case with my soul. My name of my soul is who I am, is my created self. And I could see the origin of my birth, of my soul birth, of my true birth. I could see the very essence. I describe it as a photon, a singular photon that was superpositioned. It's superpositioned in two different ways. It was superpositioned in that I could see that it was a single photon that was one of all of these bazillion other photons of the divine self, of the light of the divine itself. The light of the divine itself was all of the stars and all of the universe all in one place, and not collapsing into a black hole, just staying as single photons, but on a huge collective. But it was oneness. And I was exactly the same as all of those photons, but I was one of them. And so I was a limited form of this unlimitedness, but of the same substance. And I could see also, I could see the long tail life, width and breadth of my existence as a soul. So my soul had its origin, my createdness, but it's also, I'd lived for eons. My soul, I've been alive as a soul for eons, and I could see the individual lives I had lived, like a piece of paper. So if there's a big huge blob, and the blob is that gelatinous stuff that the kids play with, but it's monstrous, and each of my lives is like a thin piece of paper, and it takes up only a micron of this blob. And maybe, I don't know how many lives there were, but they were not anywhere near the totality of who I am. They were never myself. They were always emanations of lives, but I was so much bigger and had lived so much longer. And because I was in timelessness, I couldn't tell from where I was. And I was inside of my soul, seeing my lives, and outside of my soul, seeing my soul, my consciousness. And I could see the lives that I had lived, but I couldn't tell if they were simultaneous because I was in timelessness, or sequential. They were all at once. All of this is all at once. And and I wanted to understand, the universe. And so tell me everything. Tell me everything about everything. And I was downloaded in knowledge. And this knowledge was the functionality of all of the cosmos, from the smallest from like the Higgs boson field, through which all energy becomes matter, even underneath that, and all of the complexity of all interactions of all sentient and non-sentient beings and planetary systems, all of it was in me. And I understood it. And then I knew that I was known. I knew that myself was fully known. All of me, all of my soul was known. All of my lives were known, but in particular, all of my life as Peter was known. And I knew that I was completely and fully known, and nothing was hidden from the divine eye. And in this place, I went through a life review. And the life review I went through was to go through all of the suffering that Peter, I had given away in my life, all the harm I had caused in my entire life. I experienced, I didn't like watch it as a movie. I experienced it from the point of view of every single person, inside of their body, inside of their emotions, inside of their thinking, inside of their experience. I was inside of them. And it was juxtaposed to all of the reasons and causations that I had decided to do to cause them pain. Why did I want to cause them pain? I understood that. And here's the pain that I caused them. And it turns out that the pain that I caused them, compared to the reason that I had to cause that pain, the pain was 10,000 times greater than the reason that I had decided to give them. And so I went through this judgment process where I saw all of the things that I had done to people and saw the reasons why I did it. And I judged myself guilty of causing pain. And the pain that I had given away, I actually ended up giving to myself. I had that pain. And meanwhile, the voice was speaking inside of me. The voice was the entire infinite illuminated darkness where I was, this heaven, but it was also right next to me and it was inside of me, but I couldn't see it. I was blind to its physical presence, but it was speaking inside of me. I love you. I made you. I know you. I've always known you. There's nothing unknown about you. I love you as you are for what you did, no matter what it was. I love you because you are my creation. And I could see, and you are my creature, and I could see all of humanity. And I could see all of the pain that all of humanity had ever caused individually to people. And I understood that it was a function of the algorithm of the coding of the universe, not my fault for causing this pain. Yes, I made decisions to cause the pain, but the decisions that I made were based in the coding of the universe. That was not my fault. I had choice, but I didn't design the system, and that was true for every person. And so I understood this great equality of brokenness among all humanity that was not our fault. And the voice was saying inside of me, I love you, I made you, I forgive you, I love you. And then it seemed like all I could suddenly hear this voice. It was speaking inside of me, but it was overcome by the pain and suffering I had given away. And then I became aware that the voice had been speaking inside of me, and I became aware of all the love that had been given to me in my life by many of these same people, and all of the love I had given away in my life. And it seemed to me that that very love itself was what allowed me to hear the voice of the divine. And because I could hear the voice of love, I listened to the voice of love. And as I listened to the voice of love, I was forgiven. I accepted the love. I accepted the forgiveness. And when I accepted the forgiveness, I entered into a unity of being, a oneness of being, where love and beauty, joy, hope, understanding, knowledge, paradise, bliss, awe, adoration, peace, healing, wholeness, all these things that are the good thing, goodness, the separate things in life that are so good were all one thing, and they infilled me, and I could see that this oneness was the divine oneness itself, and I expanded with it. I became as big as my soul was outside of my body. I became much bigger. I felt like I was an expanding balloon, and it was almost painful. It was like when if one more bit of the divine oneness had come into me, I would have obliterated back into unity permanently. And so I was expanded to this unitive state of being that was it was like my containment unit was at its capacity. So we can talk a little bit about that from a human point of view in a minute. So when I was in this state of being, I said to the divine, am I dead? And the voice said, yes, you're dead. And I said, well, I can't die now. And the voice said, why? And I said, because my parents are suffering and I lost a sister and can't lose another son. And in that instant, I was swept across heaven, like not just like distantly across heaven, but down through layers of heaven to the edge of where creation begins, not like the Big Bang, but a sort of where the energy of heaven becomes the manifestation of the universe. And it was like I was poking my head out, looking down from heaven into all of the universe. I could see all of the universe and all of the galaxies. And then my vision was focused into one galaxy and into one star system and into our planet. And and the voice, as I was looking, the voice is speaking to me, and it fills not just the whole universe, but all of heaven. And the voice says, in the way that I love you now, and I can't even describe to you all of the love that has ever existed on earth, the best love that has ever existed, times 100 billion is not enough to describe this love. And it was in the way that I love you now, I have always loved you. And because of my love, all is well, was well, and will be well because of my love. And I knew the truth of that. And I could see all of humanity. So this is being said to me, filling my entire being, filling the entire universe, filling all of heaven. And I could see on earth all 7 billion people all at once. And everyone had like a gold fleck inside of them. And everyone is going through their life. There are wars going on, and babies being born, and people making love, and death occurring, and gardening, and you name it. Everybody's doing whatever they're doing at the moment that I'm watching, and everybody's covered under a foam. And this is a thick foam, and nobody can see the light and the love like I can see it from where I am. They are all blind to the extent of it. And the voice said to me, in the way that I love you now, I have always loved you. You are my particularly beloved child, but so is everybody else. Every other person is as particularly beloved of me as you are. And because of my love, you now know that no matter what happens, all will be well, and all has been well, and all will be well for all of them. And I could see my parents' faces in particular, and I could see their suffering that they had endured. I could see the suffering that they would endure in my death, and I could see their lives without my death. And meanwhile, the voice was saying to me, time to come home. Your life is over. It's time for you to come back to me. And I said, but I have another reason. I was leaving on a national theater tour, and I'd made a promise. I'd made a promise to the director that I wouldn't get hurt on this trip. There were no understudies. It was a 4-month, 24,000 miles, 64 show trip around the United States in a theater company. And I was leaving in 2 weeks. And we'd been in rehearsal, and I said, I made a promise to this guy, and God made no response to my query. I got this, I made this promise. I can't come now. The voice says, you come home now. It's time to come home. And I said, but I haven't gone through the doorway completely yet. I haven't come all the way to you yet. Do I have to come to you now? It's your time. Come to me. But no, you don't have to come to me now. And I said, well, if I can come back, can I come back here? If I go back to earth, if I go back to my life, can I come back to this bliss, this heaven, this oneness of being, you? And the divine said, yes, you can come back here. And I said, well, then I choose to live my life. And the voice said to me, you won't live your life, and sent me back. And as I left, I became crushed down in size and my astral self came back to me. And as I approached my life, my body, there were all these openings, these tunnels that I could go through. And I could see all of these probabilities for all of the lives that I could live as Peter. And each one of them had an opening. And in the middle of it was like a big circle of all these much smaller circles. And in the middle of it was the white divine light itself, the purity of being. And I could go in there. I was given the choice to enter into the purity of light. And I was like, I'm not ready for that yet. I want some autonomy. I want some selfness. And I chose. And in the instant of that thought, I made the choice. And I didn't go into the fullness of the light. I went off to the side of the light, still on the edges of it, but not in the intensity of it. And I entered into this tunnel, which was full of all these possibilities and probabilities of the life I would live. And as I entered this tunnel, I became smaller and smaller and smaller, crushed and crushed and crushed till I got to my body. And I felt like I was being screwed in like an ice screw into my body. And the first sensation I had was suffering. And I was in pain, and I was racked with pain because freezing to death is painful. It hurts. And the first sensation I had was pain. And finally, my brain started coming back online. The more it came back online, the more pain I felt. And then my ears sort of opened up and I could hear sound. And then my brain sort of came online and I could hear voice. And then I could understand language and I could feel my body being jostled. And I got pulled up to my feet and I opened my eyes and I didn't know where I was. I didn't know who I was or what was going on or what I was. And as I began to understand, my partner Tim was screaming at me, "You were dead. You were dead. If you died, I was going to die." And he was crying and screaming and in a panic. And he was so overjoyed. He was so overjoyed. He's like, "Oh my God, you were dead." And and then he got me to pull the rope, and the rope came free on the first pull, and we descended and we self-treated for hypothermia. By the time I got to the bottom of the rappel, I had enough of my brain in the world to know what to do again, and so I retreated for hypothermia and survived. And then more terrible things happened in the next 24 hours, and I came back an entirely different person. I'm an entirely different person.
It's amazing that as you came back into your body, you pulled the rope, and on the first try of the pull, you were free.
Yeah, so like somebody let go of it. I couldn't believe it. I was like,
Yes.
oh, the rope's free. I like maybe I can rationalize it by maybe I fell off far enough or I fell in a different way and it pulled the rope in a different way from a different angle. I don't know. All I know is that it came free.
What an amazing story. And I know that we've got an archive of you, shows with you where you do share more of your story. When you were so full and expansive, and you've got the knowledge and you saw the spark in all of us, how must you feel about now and the journey for each heart? Is it simple but not so easy? What is the journey and how do we apply this to our lives?
Well, the first thing is that there's no need to worry. All really is well. No one is lost. Everyone is well. And there's nothing that you need to do. You don't have to go to an ashram. You don't have to sit and meditate. You don't have to do anything. All, all you need to do is love. All you need to do is just be yourself. And so I've never in my whole life since tried to convince anyone or make anyone believe because I know that in the moment of their death, which is that close to them, it's the length of my life is the wink of my eye. That's why that's one of the wisdoms that I came back with is the understanding of not just the temporality of life, but the quickness of it. That's why I was like, oh, I can do that. That's that fast. I'll be back here in a minute. Oh, well, it is from that point of view, but not so much from here. Um,
It was very interesting. The name of a soul, your experience of the soul, and you are going to teach more on what you've learned and has the wisdom you learned in heaven, the downloads of knowledge that you learned in heaven. But the name of a soul, seeing your soul, how do you put that in perspective of all your lives? And you may not be aware of all those lives, but again, it must reinforce the lessons of love. who did you see yourself as individual expressions incarnating of your soul, and how does that compare to your soul? You said it really doesn't compare, but
Doesn't compare, and I can't see them now. I only one of the I was going to mention this, but I remember saying I'll cover that in a few minutes. I can't, my brain can't, doesn't have the capacity to carry back what I understood on the other side. I have only been able to access a small amount of the wisdom that waits for all of us once we are disembodied. And my brain can only process, I could only carry back so much. Um, but I've spent my life in contemplation of this, in meditation on this, opening the door over and over and over again to try to, out of my own desperation, try to find more heaven for me to return to now. So in terms of my previous lives, I can't see what they were, but I do know this much, that not one of them was ever me. They were never me. And that I've chosen in my life not to bother with them because they were always incarnations of limited form. I'm after the wholeness of being. I want the truth of the oneness itself, not manifestations of it, not lesser forms of it. Even if the lesser form is me, I don't even want that. I only want the higher consciousness because that is who I actually am. None of these have ever been me. I have this friend, he's a near-death experiencer. He says to me, don't say my name is, because your name is your soul name. Say instead, Peter, you are called Peter. They call you Peter, as opposed to your name is Peter. And that's, even if I don't use that language because that's hard for people to hear, that's what I hear inside myself, that my name is not Peter. I am not my body. And I was never any of my incarnations. I'm not this one. I wasn't those. And so whatever karma I carry over from them, it doesn't matter to me in my pursuit. I can't, what matters to me in my pursuit is to aim at the very oneness of being, because that is actually who I am, superseding all the rest of it. And so my whole pursuit in my life has not been to understand myself, but to understand my divine self, to access my divine self. And so I kept my mouth shut for 20 years about this, and I kept my mouth shut for close to 40 years about my interior life. I came out as a near-death experiencer in a big way nationally with my now bestseller, but in 2015. But I never came out until recently about my interior practices of prayer and Kriya Yoga in order to uh, create a larger space inside myself to access the divine. And so I've spent, one of the things about a near death experience is that it's not actually over. I mean, it had an end, and then I began a whole new life, but it's still with me every single day of my life. I'm never outside of it. I'm always above myself, looking through my eyes. I heard this rabbinic saying the other day. The body is like a shoe, and the soul is like a body. The foot of the soul fits in the shoe, and the shoe thinks the foot is all there is, but the body knows better. The body is huge. I am much larger than my physical self, and I live in this other realm all the time, and I am stuck inside this place. I I feel like I live inside a biological machine, and that I know that machine will end, and that it's not my true self, but it has capacities. And so I've spent my whole life reflecting on my near-death experience, and it keeps giving to me. Near-death experience is a gift that, as long as you cultivate it, it keeps growing. It keeps giving gifts, gift after gift after gift. And I don't grasp these gifts. I don't own these gifts. I don't hold these gifts because when I tried that early on, I would be blocked. I would lose my access. And so I learned not to grasp, not to own, not to name, not to claim, just to be. And I'm still working that through. I'm still working on that. But the truth is that the less self I have, the less egoic mind I have, the less false self I have, the more true self I have here in this world. And if there's any gift at all that is the most worthy gift that I've received from heaven, it's heaven itself here now. That's what I want here now, to experience as much of that divine place as I can in this life. And that's how it is for me now, even in trial and tribulation and suffering and in my regular real life, because I'm a real person and I have real relationships and real things, good things happen and real bad things happen in my life all the time, like everybody else. The difference for me is that even when there's suffering going on in my life, I still have this place inside myself, this pearl inside of me that is the most precious thing that there is, that vibrates with truth, that is always speaking inside me. This voice has never stopped speaking inside me. It's always talking inside me. And I have learned to practice techniques to listen more clearly, to feel more directly. And I have a lot to say. I have a lot to teach. And I haven't taught because I wasn't ready to teach. So you may know this about me, Lauren. I my life changed. I was an English major. I graduated with an English degree. I was going to go into architecture, going to be an architect in my family firm. Dad was president of the AIA in Massachusetts and had a big, had a business, and sister was in graduate school in architecture. And I was going to go and spend my whole life at a drafting board, working in construction, learning to become from all ends of architecture. And I abandoned all of it. And I went to divinity school and I studied mysticism at Yale, which they don't actually teach. I had to put together classes from all over the university and visiting professors. And I did that in order to find my way back into myself. And but I decided early on that I wasn't going to teach the truth of what I knew until I was ready, until people told me that they could see it from me. And so I waited 40 years for people to tell me that they could see the light coming from me and to feel the radiance coming off of me. And what I just said, would never have said until about 3 or 4 years ago, because I didn't want to say what no one could see. I could see it, but that didn't mean anybody else could see it. And so when people finally began to tell me, in my yoga group, I would go to yoga class, and yoga teacher told me, I could tell you how that happened, but once she told me, then a whole bunch of other people told me, and I wasn't asking them. I need you. You don't ask that question. Do you see the light in me? That's like admitting that you don't have any. And so once people started seeing it, then I decided I was finally ready. And so that's why I'm now 40 years into this. I'm here with Neo Network, uh, beginning to try to teach wisdom that I got from heaven that still flows out. And it's not, wisdom isn't knowledge. It's not head knowledge. It's not book knowledge. It's something entirely different. It's soul knowledge.
And we thank you so much for stepping forward and being bold to share this story and to share that wisdom. As we move on our planet at this time, it is one of the most critical things that each of us can do is enhance and cultivate, develop this relationship with our higher self, with this divineness within us, with this oneness within us, and it will feel good. So when you look out at the collective world, what do you think's going on, and what is the journey then for each of us?
Journey for each of us is home. The journey for each of us is understanding that you're not your body. You never were. You live under the veil. It's an illusion. It has its value. We have relationships. It has its purpose, but it's not you. And if you aim your heart at heaven, that's what you find. Seek the divine. And as for the world, we're in this crazy time. We got COVID and we got climate change and we've got tides rising and droughts and fires and floods and where I live, the tide's coming. Where I live, I live in the coldest body of water in the North Atlantic, and our temperature is rising. And we had hammerhead sharks in the Gulf of Maine this summer, which is crazy because the water's warm enough for a Caribbean shark to be in the Gulf of Maine. And all the lobsters, they're all moving to Canada. It's This whole world is in a tumultuous upheaval, but near-death experience has been medically induced for 60 years through cardiac care all over the globe. There's at least 10 to 20 million of us in the United States, plus all of us around the world. There is a global spiritual mystical phenomena that medical science is driving, bringing back people from the dead. And we're coming back with mystical experiences. And now, because of technology, here I am talking to you on Zoom and on YouTube, we're all talking to each other. And we're all discovering, well, what did you come back with? Oh, you came back with love? Well, I came back with love. Oh, you're from Iran and you came back with love? Well, I'm from the United States. I came back with love. Oh, you're a Muslim and I was a Christian? Well, all religion breaks away. All religion ends. And we are each individual. It's this democratization, this egalitarian equalization of the divine light living inside of human beings without institution, erupting all over the world. And that's just some of us. There are so many more mystical people, so many more spiritually transformed people who've not had NDEs, but who have been touched by the divine, and they know this truth inside themselves. And now, for the first time in the history of the world, we have an opportunity to bring this to the forefront, to bring love to the forefront, to bring peace and joy and truth to the forefront, with capital P and a capital T and a capital H for hope, a capital L for love. I'm hopeful for the future of humanity. I am hopeful for the future of humanity because religions have been fighting wars, but mystics never fight wars. Mystics aren't warriors like that. They might be brave and courageous, but they know love. They know themselves. They know the divine self. This is an opportunity for humanity to nudge the future toward a new heaven and a new earth here. That's what I'm after.
We're after that with you too. Wow. Thank you. And that's from just your first near death experience. And we're not going to go into your second near death experience at this, but we do have an archive with you at acoustichealth.com, and your shows are available there. We'll put a media player on this webpage too for folks to listen into that because it is a fascinating story and it brings us hope as well. And it kindles what we know so deeply inside of us, that's the reason that we move forward, that because it's these lessons in love and we are remembering the great love that we are. And before I have you talk about what you will be teaching here soon on the New Earth One Network, I want to have you go back to talking about, did we get everything that we wanted said about this enormity of your soul and you and the wisdom in the universe as it came back into your human form? Was there anything else to add about what that was like?
Well, I'm sure there is. It was reductionist. It's limiting. It's disorienting. It's confusing. It needed to be reintegrated. It was like being it's like the movie Avatar. I came back and into a world that everybody seemed to know me, but I didn't even know myself. And nobody seemed to understand that my life had ended, and that because I came back by choice, their lives were different. I could constantly see that. See, if I was supposed to die, and so my parents were supposed to grieve. There was no wife, there were no kids, there was no grandchild. And I can see that now. I live that now, but nobody else sees that. And so I'm always living in these two places. I'm always living with one foot here and one foot there, one eye here, one eye there. I'm always living sort of non-attached to this world. It's There's a lot to say about that.
Yes, and that is why you are stepping forward to teach this wisdom, to share this wisdom. Because as we've said many times, we don't have to have a near death experience to learn it and to understand it. And this is what's happening on our planet as well. The earth has ascended and we are ascending. And simply enough, that means our return to this love, to this joy,
Yes.
dropping of density. And so you are a way shower for doing that. Tell us about the courses that you're going to teach. There's one coming up and there's two sessions. So I'm certain that you're going to share about your second near death experience, but this is really the wisdom you learned in heaven.
Some of it for sure. Everybody asks, why is there suffering? Well, I actually have a partial answer to that that came from my near-death experience, but also subsequently from uh, other mystical experiences that came as a result of my near-death experience. I understand some of the structure of the universe, why suffering exists, why it's necessary, why it's even helpful. And I'm going to be talking about that this Wednesday in part one. And in part two of the same course, I want to be talking about how to language. How do we speak about the ineffable? What are the tools that we have at hand to talk about the thing that is no thing? Um, that's what the second class is about. Is how do you define nothing? How do you speak about your experience when you have an after death communication, a deceased loved one comes to visit you, and you have this direct communication of divine love or understanding or acceptance or forgiveness. And then when you say it, it just comes out bleh. Like it doesn't carry the feeling of your heart. You can't convey to anybody the meaning, the true meaning of it. Well, I can help you with learning to language these things. How do we to language the ineffable, and how do we weave the light into the words that we say so that the words are carried by the light itself? And that's really what this is all about, learning to language it. It's not so much learning metaphor and symbols. It's learning to weave the light into the language so that people hear it with the ear of their hearts. And even if they can't grasp the fullness of what you experience, they can get a taste of it because it's already inside them. I've spent my life in pursuit of these things. Languaging is, in particular, your audience doesn't know that I spent uh, 18 years as a congregational minister speaking from the pulpit using these same techniques, and then 15 years on television and radio as a sacred storyteller on a couple of NBC stations, weaving light into words to bring hope and inspiration to Buddhists and atheists and agnostics and Jews and Christians and Catholics and everybody. And the light is indiscriminate because God has no religion.
So very good. Thank you so much for that. What an important tool, weaving the light into the words we speak in every situation. In a
Mm.
way, it is divine diplomacy as we
Mm.
actually talk to other people in a divisive world, in a world where we have to transcend that. And this is one of the ways that we can do it. The words that you help us speak from that divine love. I love how you said it, the ear of our hearts,
Mm.
ears of our hearts. And it's interesting. I love that you said why in the first session that you're going to cover suffering. Why is it necessary? So many of us will feel our heartstrings tugged at when we maybe go travel somewhere or we see the suffering in the world. I mean, even Gautama Buddha saw the suffering in the world and it led him on his journey. And you said why it's necessary. So that takes some pressure off each of us for feeling the pain of that suffering, for looking out and seeing someone suffer or seeing squalid conditions. Maybe it's one thing to say, what can I do to help in this situation? But your impression on why is there suffering and why is it necessary helps to dispel some of that. Do you want to share on this?
Yeah, that's a very big question that you just opened because I've spent a lot of time in my life in what used to be called third world nations, working among the poorest of the poor, and saw some very terrible things. And just closer to home, have seen some very terrible suffering. And suffering is awful. It's horrendous. It's difficult. It's painful. But also, suffering can open the door. There's a For those of you who have had cancer, maybe you've heard of the gift of cancer. The gift of cancer is when a person is terminal and maybe they're getting all the medicines that make you so sick. But the gift of cancer is understanding. It's wisdom. Wisdom when suffering breaks a person, this ruins when you have nothing left, when you're absolutely at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom, and your ego can no longer will anything good in your life. When your ego gives up, that's when the divine can enter in, because it's the ego that is in our way. The only one in between me and the divine is me. And that's why meditation matters. That's why centering silence matters, because it's the elimination of the self that is the preventative that's in the way of the divine presence. It's a big question talking about why whole nations of people suffer and what we can do to help alleviate that. But yet, why suffering is built right into the structure of the universe beyond our little tiny planet. It's not just us. It's not about us.
Very good. Well, all right. If you watching or listening would love to experience the teachings of Peter Panagore, please register. You'll find the information for this workshop, this online 2 sessions with Peter, right here on this webpage. You will get registered. This is also a Q&A session with you as well. It's on
Oh,
Zoom
yes.
and it's recorded so those who can't be on it can still be in that energy of the call and the information through those recordings. But you're on Zoom, and that's a great place to ask questions of Peter, anything that you may have in applying the beautiful information that he shares. We're actually even going to offer a bonus course, which was 2 hours long, aiming at the oneness. And this is what you aim for. You aim for the oneness as you continue to live your near death experience. Well, Peter, thank you so much. As we say goodbye, I want to just give you a moment to wrap anything else up about this course.
Suffering is real in people's lives. This is not theoretical. This is practical mysticism. Mysticism is practical in the world. If it's not practical in the world, then what good does it do anyone other than you and me individually. It has to be able to be applied in the practical world. And so I'm always trying to help people make real, figure out how to make real decisions in their real lives with the real situations that they face. So this isn't just theoretical, it's practical and real.
Practical and real. And it's all about love and opening to love and removing the barriers that keep us from it. I love the impression of the foam, how you saw the billions of people on the planet separated or oblivious to this greatness that they are through that foam. And you are helping us work our way through that foam home to us.
Home through
Thank
the
you.
poem.
Home through the foam, baby. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you for this incredible time with you today. And we're excited for you to share with our audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren, for having me. Peace to you all. Namaste.